So let's get to that ruling. How significant are the comments by this California judge and his ruling that a law professor's emails with the former president need to be turned over to the House committee?
Thanks so much for having me, Scarlett. On the one hand, there's actually nothing directly related to Trump of legal consequence in this ruling. This ruling is a procedural motion in a civil case that says that former law dean John Eastman has to turn over a number of emails that he was trying to argue that he shouldn't have to turn over. So it doesn't have any direct bearing on accusations against Trump. At the same time, it's still pretty significant.
Why are we making such a big deal out of it then if it has no legal bearing on the former president?
Well, it is a federal judge looking at the state of affairs and some of the arguments that are being made about what happened in January 6th. And in a sense, he's saying the quiet part out loud. He's articulating that he thinks that the plan, based on the evidence he's seen, was obviously illegal, and that it's more likely than not that Trump committed felonies. So even though it doesn't have any formal bearing, it's somebody in a position of judicial power and authority looking at this evidence and opining that there really is a there there.
Okay.
That's pretty important.
So if the legal effect of this opinion is fairly limited in scope, outside of the legal arena, how important is this to public discourse? What will this opinion mean for public discourse of the investigation?
Well, I think for the many people who are already inclined to think that there's something pretty significant there, this provides another piece of supporting evidence. I think for those who might have a different view, they'll probably try to minimize it. But for the efforts to look at what happened in January 6th and the efforts to get to the bottom of it, I think this is an important sign that that this investigation is very much worth pursuing, that we're on the right track, that there's a there, and also John Eastman's now going to have to turn over a number of emails. There's still many, many thousands of emails at issue, but it's going to be very interesting to see what's in those emails.
Okay, right. So we have to follow the evidence, in other words,
Bingo,
or follow
exactly.
what could be evidence. You mentioned that this indicates there could be a there. Does it set any precedents? Is there a there in terms of other tangential lawsuits that are tied to January 6th?
I think it does not set any legal precedent. In some sense, Judge Carter's thoughts on this, don't have they don't have the force of law, but it, I think, might embolden investigators to continue to pursue what they're doing and to continue to engage forcefully to try to understand better what did and didn't happen. I will note in passing that Judge Carter is an alum of my own law school, the UCLA School of Law.
There you go. There's a pedigree. Overall, Dean Mnookin, how would you grade the House committee's progress on investigating the January 6th riot? Would you say it's a C, C+, A, F?
I'd give them a solid B at this point. I mean, I think they're really trying to pursue these leads. They're trying to pursue it seriously. It's a shame that we didn't have bipartisan support for following the evidence. But I think they're doing a serious and credible job of trying to understand what happened and trying to create mechanisms for legal accountability.
But it feels like if we want to follow that model of, a school grade, it feels like they're asking for a lot of extensions. This thing is taking a long time to get through.
Fair. That's fair. It's not as speedy as we might have wished, but at least it is being pursued.
Now, the House committee is looking into the long gap in White House phone records as well on January 6th, because apparently there's a 7-hour time frame where there's no information on any phone calls that President Trump might have been making, and that's a time frame that coincides with the storming of the Capitol. Anecdotally, several people have remarked that they did speak with the president that don't show up in the phone records that were released. So what legal recourse does the committee have then to get the necessary information to fill in that time gap?
Yeah, it's really a problem when those in power don't make use of the methods that they're supposed to. I mean, there's a lot of speculation that Trump was in the habit of sometimes borrowing other people's cell phones to make calls and the like. And when we link back to concerns about email accounts and private servers, and yet we look at these forms of engagement in ways that don't create strong information traces. It's troubling. There's no other word for it. It's
okay, so I mean, maybe there were workarounds on that day, such as using someone else's cell phone, but there are also instances where you have people who did have contact with the president and they are not complying with requests by the committee to sit for an interview or hand over documents. Several Trump allies like Kevin McCarthy or Jim Jordan have consistently ignored requests by the committee to do so. I thought these bodies had subpoena power.
Yes. It's, the degree to which we're seeing a refusal to comply with legitimate investigatory procedures is really distressing, and there should be consequences.
Well, I mean, there should definitely be consequences. Otherwise, these committees look toothless, and it sets a really bad precedent for anyone later on who doesn't agree with the premise of any investigation. The
committee did just recommend a couple of folks to be held in contempt, and I think we need to be able to have serious accountability, serious investigation, and following the rule of law. I was part of a group of 14 deans to write about the insurrection and the aftermath and the dangers that this moment in time and what happened before and what happened afterwards pose to the rule of law and to our democracy. And so these are matters that must be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean, how much did that come up in this collection of essays from 14 different law school deans in the U.S.?
Yes, we each wrote a chapter. It's, I think, the first time, certainly in recent history, that a group of law deans, this many law deans, have come together to try to engage in a scholarly and public intellectual project. And it was January 6th and the insurrection that led us to engage together. And the essays each take a different tack. Some of them focus on structural racism. Some of them focus on the attorneys general, and some of them focus on legal ethics. My personal essay looked at all of the cases that were brought to attempt to argue that the election results were fraudulent, all of which...
So many of which were thrown out, right?
Right. Nearly every single one was thrown out. And but that doesn't, by itself, that doesn't mean it was wrong to bring them. And what my essay tries to explore is the way that the problem with these lawsuits isn't that they lost. It's perfectly legitimate to bring lawsuits that might be unlikely to win. The problem was that they were brought with literally no evidentiary basis and not even in good faith. In my opinion, in many ways, the real audience for the lawsuits was not the judges before whom they were brought, but rather Trump's base. And we need our law students to understand the importance of good faith and the importance of evidence, and that we have to take those values seriously, or the rule of law is at serious risk, as is our democracy.
Good faith and evidence. And I'm glad that you bring up that a lot of these lawsuits were brought up and there was no evidence to back them up, because based on what he's done and said in the past, President Trump tends to obfuscate, delay, countersue when he's in legal hot water. I'm not saying that he's doing that this time around, but that has been a habit in the past. How do you cut through that? I mean, you talk about good faith and evidence. How do you counter something like that, a strategy like that?
I don't think I have any magical answers, but I agree that we've seen a very large amount of relatively successful effort to prevent accountability. And nobody should be above the law, not the president, not the former president.
Just help us keep track here. There's the House investigation into January 6th. The DOJ, I suppose, has recourse to indict someone. Which other investigations or bodies of
There's also
government are looking into this right now.
Well, there's also the potential for charges under state law. There was a very active investigation here in New York that seems to have stalled, but there's certainly also the chance that there could be charges brought against Trump or, in some cases, close allies in state court as well as federal. That's part of the beauty of the federal system in some ways.
Okay, we talked about how the House Investigation Committee has asked for all kinds of extensions. When do you think we might get any kind of resolution, closure on any of this? I mean, is this a 2024, 2025 kind of event?
I hope not. I hope that we see developments and some degree of closure before that. Obviously, the length of time. It's hard for this to stay front and center for the American public. And also, as